Charging $80 for a video game isn't just ridiculous, but it's dangerous. It's setting a precedent for games to cost more and more sooner and sooner. Do not buy the Switch 2. Do not buy its $90 controllers or its $80 games. It's that simple. Vote with your dollar.
So anyway,
pre-orders for Nintendo Switch 2 were absolutely insane.
Thank you for your never-ending support and for your passionate love of Nintendo.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, tariffs may be temporary, but higher prices are forever. So anyway, as anyone with a functional brain could have predicted, another company has just followed Nintendo's massive pre-order success like lockstep by raising the prices of gaming across the board. Microsoft Xbox? Raising prices across the board on a failed product.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
So anyway, the 2 terabyte Series X cost more than a PS5 Pro.
You serious?
For now. We've actually got a handy-dandy little table here.
But Wizard, this has everything to do with the tariffs and the orange bad man in the White House. The prices of Xbox consoles are elevating in claims of Microsoft being reactionary to the tariffs on
China.
I'm not buying it. Xbox is behind in the console race. You really don't think that there isn't a stockpile of unsold hardware somewhere? That Xbox that you're buying off the shelf right now wasn't made yesterday, it was made months ago. If these tariffs were such a serious issue, they could just slow down production.
Hold up.
Stagger the releases.
Wait a minute.
Hell, with the profits that they're pulling in, they could eat the costs and not even feel it. Then Microsoft would then go on to record $94 billion in profit. They would then double their growth. Their valuation hits $3.4 trillion, and suddenly we are expected to believe that they have to increase prices because of rising development costs and economic uncertainty.
Blow it out your ass!
They could eat the costs and not even feel it, but they won't, because tariffs are just a convenient scapegoat. And even if they were rescinded tomorrow, these prices would stay the exact same.
Who are we talking about?
So $80 games are the new norm for quote-unquote some games. Xbox consoles are going up across the board.
The price hike for consoles kicks in today!
Xbox controllers are going up across the board.
$199.99! A controller is $200 fucking dollars!
And headsets are going up across the... all globally except for headsets. Right, headsets are only going up in US and Canada.
Oh, thank you!
So first off, obviously Nintendo has been successful in their moves upwards thus far, but I would still describe this new revelation as basically Xbox roasting Xbox on an open fire. They were already lagging behind both Sony and Nintendo in console hardware sales according to VG charts, and it does not appear to be close.
That's a lot of damage!
They all but just admitted defeat a few months ago when Microsoft, for all intents and purposes, became a third-party publisher, which will be releasing most of its games across all platforms from here on out.
Are all Xbox games going to PlayStation someday, or will there still be exclusives?
We are finding that our games shipping on multiple platforms is a good thing for Xbox. It makes Xbox stronger. When you ask the question like no, I mean, there's Xbox games that have shipped that we're not going to put on other platforms. You're going to see more games shipping on PlayStation, shipping on Nintendo. We'll continue to support Steam the way that they ship. We think that enables us to do more on platform, do more on hardware, but let's let games live where players want to play them.
Indiana Jones has an exclusivity window. Can you solidify that Starfield's staying put for the time being?
No. There's no specific game, there's no reason for me to put a ring fence around any game and say this game will not go to a place that it would find players, where it would have business success for us, right? Our strategy is to allow our games to be available. Game Pass is an important component of playing the games on our platform, but to keep games off of other platforms, we don't think is a path that that's not a path for us. It doesn't work for us. What we're doing now, we think really enables us to build the best platform for the world's best games, because the world's biggest games are available in multiple places.
5 months later.
PlayStation first-party games will appear on Xbox/Ace's handheld hardware, says Microsoft. Because these handhelds run Windows, you have access to all the games you can play on Windows PCs. When Stefan Totilo quizzed about PlayStation games, oh my God!
Which is, to be fair, just kind of the right move across the board. Like, We're at a point where you're only hurting yourself if you don't put your games on Steam.
I just want to contextualize this around Twitch. Right now, Twitch is only at 3 million. That is how much bigger Steam is. Steam is fucking massive.
Or even just the other consoles with their tens of millions in install bases. You're just shooting yourself in the foot if you don't release everywhere. Regardless of all that, of course, this move obviously further sets in the precedent for the price of gaming in general, kinda just going up. So anyway, the obvious next question on everyone's mind is probably, will Game Pass go up next? And not to get into it now, but will other subscription models potentially go up after, if so?
Not to get too Black Mirror on you, but do you really think that your loading screens couldn't have advertisements in them eventually? Better upgrade to Game Pass Ultimate Gold.
Tonight, breaking news. This is a mega W. Mega, huge, massive. We have right here Valve banning Steam games that force players to watch advertisements.
Anyway, I could certainly see Game Pass going up in the future. I think the smart move, though, would actually probably be to lower it, if only a little bit. If gaming is suddenly becoming a luxury hobby on most platforms, and you need a larger install base anyway, I think the best way to set yourself apart is to have a subscription model that everyone can afford, while prices for everyone else's games go up. But, /doubt, if you know what I'm saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Xbox may be the weakest platform right now, but that's exactly what makes them the most dangerous. With Game Pass and cross-platform releases, they can undercut their competition on their competition's own platforms, but instead of using that power to offer better value, they're just hiking their prices like everyone else. They issued a statement saying, "We understand that these changes are challenging, and they were made with careful consideration given market conditions and the rising cost of development."
Blow it out your ass!
On that same note, Sony could also hypothetically score an easy victory here and build a ton of goodwill. Likely won't, since they already raised console prices in some regions, but if they came out tomorrow and said they're keeping the standard at $70 or even going back down to $60, they could obviously just kind of flat out embarrass their competition on the same level that they did back in E3 2013, when they responded to Xbox's always online functionality by illustrating just how easy it is, or was at least, to share games on PlayStation.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
They could absolutely create a repeat of that, this time embarrassing both Xbox and Nintendo simultaneously on the world stage. The problem is, they don't really need to at this point. They have basically every excuse to raise prices now that every other console manufacturing publisher has.
I'm telling you, it's not just
Nintendo.
All of these companies, these big companies, all of them, they're going to join the party.
Outside of projects like Concord and similar pre-release cancellations of other big dumb hero shooter spin-off ideas, they've still been relatively successful.
They have wasted billions of dollars at this point trying to get their own live service hit.
PlayStation went ahead with what we believe is somewhere between 12 or 13 different live service projects, depends on if Marathon is counted in the 12 or not. But we know that 6 of them were canceled, 2 more of those were canceled. The Last of Us's live service multiplayer game was also canceled, and we're not sure if that was included as well. They released a Helldivers 2, which, fair enough, huge success, great game. But also, like, one of the most external projects of all of these. Arrowhead is not a PlayStation studio, it's just that Helldivers is a PlayStation IP. And then the biggest catastrophe, the biggest flop in video game history. And now they have the CEO of the one that was remaining quit, and the other one in an art-stealing scandal that might actually end the studio.
And so it is funny now that after all of that, here they are, Herman Hulst himself coming on the official PlayStation blog and gleefully, proudly announcing that they're creating a brand new studio at Sony, and you'll never guess what kind of game they are working on.
I have everything under control.
They've still been relatively successful, with a large console install base, already recently raising console prices, comfortably selling a PS5 Pro for, what was it, like 700 USD now? I don't see any reason that they really need to play it safe or pull back, and the reality is that market moves like this tend to work like a trend or a domino effect, with the cabal of the largest institutions marching in lockstep to benefit each other. My wager is the next thing you'll see is companies like EA, Activision, and Ubisoft all joining in with the some games are $80 stance, which will probably start by including all of the mainline flagship franchises, your $80 Call of Duties, your $80 Battlefields.
Breaking news. With both Nintendo and Xbox increasing their prices up to $80, it's expected that other publishers will fall in line soon. And most players are already wondering which games are going to be the next ones to make the jump. A few developers and executives have already weighed in on the topic, and in a surprising twist, EA CEO Andrew Wilson had already stated that they have no plans to raise their prices at this time, regardless of what the competition does.
What a twist! Your $80 Assassin's Creeds and Far Cry's, etc. No idea what this means for free-to-play stuff. And after, if not before, all of the massive AAA publishers but Sony have done their part, Sony will no doubt do the same. Or perhaps slowly ease in by dropping one of their bigger first-party releases at an $80 price point to just kind of test the waters. And I'll keep buying Chinese games and indie releases on Steam sales instead. All the while, we can pick up games like Expedition 33 Clair Obscur, which gives us a more breathtaking fantasy world to explore than even the largest AAA fantasy game developers have in recent years, for less money and at a discount if we got in early.
It is incredibly frustrating because it paints a very clear contrast between it and how shallow and utterly vapid the rest of this industry has become. Games like Expedition 33 are what we deserve, but are rarely given. And it's not for a lack of talent. We know that because these are former Ubisoft developers making a game that we would never see from Ubisoft, or any major publisher for that matter.
Or Schedule 1, which basically looks like a PS2 game, but costs next to nothing and offers dozens of hours of no bullshit, pure unadulterated fun, and has made a killing for its one-person development team, right? We've got a seemingly endless supply of Hollow Knight clones and 2D Souls-likes otherwise. No, there aren't too many of them. There can never be too many of them. Or any of the many smaller indie titles which you can purchase for a pittance in comparison to the old prices, let alone the new prices. And personally, I think they're usually just kind of better games than especially all of the boring, hyper-realistic AAA slop, which keep you occupied for hundreds of hours, but only by having you engage in the same repetitive gameplay loops in the same boring, empty open worlds over and over again.
See, like in Fallout, like if you have to run for literally like 3 to 4 minutes, like there'd be like a weird little like rad roach over here, and then over here there's like a baby in the trash, but it's actually a grenade, and then like you're listening to like the cool radio or something. Oh cool, there's nothing here.
To top it all off, I'm personally glancing out of the corner of my eye at an enormous backlog of PS2 games, for example, that I still haven't gotten back around to playing. And like, this probably won't appeal to younger audiences so much, but I'd personally be happy to just sit down and replay one of my favorite classics again. Any of the OG Metal Gear Solids, Final Fantasy, Jak and Daxter, etc. They all appeal to me more than paying $80 to play more of the same kind of boring slop we've been getting so much of lately. Other hobbies like anime have never seemed cheaper in comparison, and that's not to mention emulation and piracy, which are obviously going to seem more appealing than ever with the prices of everything rising. But that's of course also coming from someone who has reserved themselves to only buying 2 or 3 AAA games a year these days regardless, because most of them are generic, open world, hyper-realistic, 300 hours of pointless fetch quests, and just why would I pay for that? Nonetheless, a lot of people probably still will.
The people are retarded.
Anyway, it's been fascinating to hear folks talk about all of the different things that people are blaming these price increases on. They blame inflation for rising prices, of course, even though wages haven't kept up. They blame tariffs for price hikes occurring both before and after the tariffs somehow, and now they're lower than they were before, and they'll likely go away at some point. But also digital games are also going up all the same. I'll leave it to you what this has to do with tariffs, just trying to offset further costs, I guess. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They blame the grand value proposition of modern games. They blame rising development costs of more complex games, which are their fault. They blame layoffs, which are their fault. Because let's be honest, gamers did not choose $500 million budgets, 10-year production cycles, and teams of 500 to 1,000 workers struggling to maintain a proper communication channel while working on something 10 times larger and then 10 times more complicated than it really has any right to be in most cases. In many cases, developing $500 million projects in a saturated market attempting to appeal to a niche demographic. And yes, I'm absolutely talking about the Concords and the Veilguards of the industry here.
Who the fuck wants to play like a bitch with a microwave on her head? What are you, retarded? Who thought this was a good idea? You stupid. Like, it's like, look at this. Nobody wants to look at this. This is weird, bro. Like, look at this. This is so stupid. Like, who does this appeal to? This is gross, man. Like, ugh. Marilyn Manson? No, that's not true. Bro, Marilyn Manson in like the 90s, I'm not gay, but he was a really attractive guy. He was a really good looking guy. It's not even close.
Who are we talking about?
But I think it's frankly unsustainable for the vast majority of publishers and developers. Am I the only one who feels like maybe it's time to just scale back on most of these projects and have more of them embrace smaller, unique, stylized experiences again? And like maybe develop niche games with niche game budgets and development cycles and demographic sizes in mind? That just kind of seems like common sense. And like all of this talk of the value proposition, how we're getting more game for our dollar than ever before, but most of the game that we get for that dollar is once again repetitive sandbox content in big, beautiful, boring, empty, open worlds.
I've played Assassin's Creed Shadows, and this is my first Assassin's Creed game since Black Flag, and I'm around 20 hours in, and I can say without hesitation that Assassin's Creed Shadows is one of the most immersive and visually stunning worlds Ubisoft has ever created. Potentially one of the best in gaming. The lighting, the seasonal shifts, the wildlife, the sound design, everything looks and sounds incredible. It's an environment that begs you to explore every inch of it, and the moment that you do, you realize that there's nothing actually worth exploring.
Almost all of which lack any sense of style or artistic direction at all. And yes, in my mind, that also includes even many of the most visually stunning and technically impressive modern games. Because while these two things are certainly not exclusive, you can absolutely have big, realistic-looking games that also feature stunning landscapes with that artistic direction and that human touch that begs to be explored and rewards you for doing so. While you can certainly have both of these in one game, even the most realistic graphics, the most believable physics, the most disorienting graphical effects, and the most sophisticated real-world model scanning and motion capture techniques are not a substitute for artistic direction. Whether that's just landscapes with unique designs and layouts and intentional mixtures of assets instead of the empty open worlds that we often get, or those that often look like they were painted in with stock assets using a foliage brush because they were painted in with stock assets using a foliage brush, or whether that's unique but simple stylized graphics or fantastical character designs or otherworldly skyboxes or intentional color design choices and unrealistic visual cues in otherwise realistic games, or whimsical particle effects that are there if for no other reason than because they simply look cool and fit the aesthetic and don't need some realistic excuse to be there. Things like unique and fantastical flora and fauna and landscapes that look less like a scan of some place that you could simply drive down the road and visit in the real world and instead look more like a fantastical painting or a vision out of a dream of something that you could barely imagine existing in the real world, but translated to a three-dimensional space in a video game. In my opinion, for sci-fi somewhat as well, but for fantasy games in particular, chasing realism often only hamstrings otherwise beautiful and technically impressive game worlds, which could instead unshackle themselves from this unhealthy and needlessly expensive obsession with realism and embrace dazzling, unique, handcrafted, and yes, sometimes unrealistic artistic directions with somewhat less impressive graphics.
That's better! That is
Most of the ones actually worth exploring are the standouts, or ironically stylized games which successfully do this thing so many fail at with significantly smaller teams and budgets, like I'm sure you can think of plenty of recent AAA open world games in general, but how many great open world AAA games can you think of from recent years? There are only so many Cyberpunk 2077s, Witcher 3s, Elden Rings, and Red Dead Redemption 2s, and 2 of those were made by the same people. Most of the others, I'm betting you'll never touch again for the rest of your lives. But that's all besides the point. This supposed value proposition kind of neglects the fact that games today also sell more than any other era outside of the lockdowns, and publishers already have more avenues to make profits on than ever before.
Just last year, Phil Spencer said that raising prices beyond $70 could become manipulative. In his words, we went through COVID, we found more ways of getting more money per player. I think that at some point you reach the peak of that, and frankly, it could go to places that are manipulative, and I'm not a big fan of that.
1 year later.
At this point, Assassin's Creed isn't even a franchise, it's just a storefront with a game attached. No, literally, that's exactly what this is, at least on PC. They implemented the Animus launcher, which essentially is a built-in third-party launcher and a direct microtransaction funnel. Players can buy weapons and armor with real money, not cosmetics, but legendary equipment with actual stats and unique passives. Upon reviewing the store, I realized just how much of Ubisoft's game design is dictated by its monetization. The game's economy is deliberately restrictive to encourage spending. They slow you down in hopes that you spend more. The base building system as an example, players need materials to upgrade their base, but resources are intentionally scarce unless you go out and grind endlessly or purchase supply packs from the in-game store. You can find massive bundles out in the world to be able to smuggle things out of enemy bases, but if you do that, well then you're not going to be able to use those scouts to reveal map locations. So either add hours of bloat to your playthrough, ignore the mechanic entirely, or spend money to utilize it. The entire design is built around inconvenience just to sell you a solution.
Also, you want to talk about a value proposition? Let's talk about game ownership. You can't even rely on these people to put all of the game in the box anymore.
Oh, what's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
And it is truly pathetic how many people I saw saying, oh, it's only one or it's only a few games. You know, back when games like the Modern Warfare 2 remake were setting the precedent for you having to download part of, if not the entire game. Now every other game requires you to download just a little extra data to play the game, including many single-player releases which won't work until you download that extra data. Single-player games. With very few exceptions, like I think the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth release actually came with 2 discs to solve this issue, but there are few exceptions of this kind, and many examples of games that you cannot play out of the box anymore. And what happens when the freaking servers go down? All amidst an ecosystem where going online will, for example, force a game like Stellar Blade to update when you go online. Can't be reverted to the initial release. It must instead be uninstalled and reinstalled offline and played offline to play the original 1.0 version without getting interrupted or locked out until it updates.
No, I don't need no internet. No, sir. Not in my life.
There was also the debacle with Sony removing Concord from people's consoles remotely. That's a little over the line. And a whole slew of other stories that I just don't want to bloat this script any further with.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
In each case, without Nintendo's written consent or express authorization, so Nintendo don't need your consent, okay? They can just walk in and do what they need to. Or unless otherwise expressly permitted by applicable law, you acknowledge that if you fail to comply with the foregoing restrictions, Nintendo may render the Nintendo account service and or the applicable Nintendo device, the console, permanently unusable in whole or in part? Motherfucker, what is your problem, brother? What is wrong with you? What?
Why, Triple H? You son of a bitch! Why? Tell me why!
We have almost no control over our games anymore, very little ownership over most of our games anymore, even on most of the better platforms, like I think GOG is probably the only exception. And yet we still have publishers trying to tell us all about the value we're getting.
Blow it out your ass!
What's most important to keep in mind here is once again that tariffs are temporary, but these higher prices are likely forever. Especially with Nintendo never going on sale and all that. But we all know that all of these and more are simply excuses for the things that they've all been wanting to do for ages, raise prices for whatever best reason that they can find. They keep, at least most of them, keep bloating development costs, development timelines, and bloating teams of developers working on an individual game anywhere from 500 to over 1,000 employees, some cases. And now many of these companies find themselves laying thousands of employees off, shuttering studios, and it's kind of all their fault for managing things this way, at least in most cases.
We keep hearing about how games are more expensive to make than ever, but what they won't say out loud is they are the ones who made it that way. You do not get to cry poor after making billions of dollars in revenue, hiring thousands of people across a dozen studios, scaling up to unsustainable sizes, and then acting shocked when your overhead crushes your margins. GTA 6 is the perfect example. That game is taking longer to develop than every GTA combined.
But now they finally have the sort of perfect storm of excuses to raise all of the prices amidst a landscape which is already ruled by microtransactions, battle passes, re-releases and remasters and remakes across multiple generations, subscriptions to play games you bought years ago because we essentially gave up on backwards compatibility, etc. And I know it, you know it, when the tariffs totally go away, when the trade war ends, when US and China come to some agreement, the games aren't going back down. It's never gonna happen.
I mean, look at this coming from Apple. Of course they're gonna raise prices with or without their exemptions.
But of course, anyway, you can't really end a conversation about this without talking about the actual biggest question on everyone's mind, I would assume at least, and that's, what will GTA 6 do now?
We just need money.
Months ago, we were reading hopeful headlines from analysts touting it as the savior of the industry, capable of standardizing up to $100 games to make up for these ludicrously bloated development costs of these modern AAA games. Well, it's dropping May 26th, approximately 1 year from now, and I assume by that time, $80 will probably be the new norm for at least open world AAA releases. And you know that Take-Two is going to feel perfectly comfortable touting their position as the king of that open world AAA market. They know that even if all they do is basically meet the previous standards, they still have a better value proposition than pretty much anyone else. And they know how to make a fucking killing with the shark cards.
I'm rich, bitch!
Also, let's just put it bluntly, I know it, you know it, most people would simply pay whatever they would charge for the quote, next GTA 5. And if they raise the price ceiling even further, not every game will be able to get away with doing the same, obviously. Most probably wouldn't. Most games that tried to release at $100 would flop. But I could pretty much guarantee that at least some will feel justified in following suit. But anyway, obviously getting pretty speculative, but I think it's reasonable to do so a little bit at this point. Anyway, I follow video game news fairly closely, but I don't usually cover it, so if I got anything stupidly wrong, just drop it in the comments. I'm open to being wrong about any of this stuff. If you want to know what my quote-unquote solution to this is,
I don't know what to tell you, bud!
the best thing I can really tell you is buy less games, especially AAA games. Buy less stupid crap you don't need across the board. Find any ways you can to save a little more and make a little more where you can, and start investing a little bit of your money each and every paycheck into big, boring, dividend-producing stocks or ETFs. Whatever you can afford to invest, big or small, because 10 years from now, I'm betting we're all gonna wish that we had just a little more passive income to cushion things out. Hashtag not financial advice, but I have been considering doing a video of sorts titled something like, Even a Baka Weeaboo Can Learn to Invest. Since I've been doing it for a few years at this point and do feel like I've gotten over most of the sort of emotional panic states that one experiences over the first couple of years of learning these things, many of these things learned the hard way.
All you need to know about the stock market is it goes up and it goes down, and it goes down a lot. And that's all you need to know.
But anyway, let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. I think I have a pretty good way of talking about how to motivate yourself, even as a nerd such as myself, who's, you know, obsessed with anime and video games and music and all this stuff. You know, basically just like how to conceptualize milestones that actually appeal to gamers and weeaboo such as myself. and can help to motivate you for the long term. I know it can be daunting to get started, but anyway, I do think that financial freedom is really important, and prices are going up, baby. Anyway, video games are cringe and so is money. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear about anime. If not, subscribe to Video Game Donkey instead.
Video Game Donkey.
Either way, hope you at least got some catharsis out of this, and peace.
My entire Steam library is just top to bottom early access games. I think there's more early access games at any given time than there are fully finished games. But to be honest with you, looking at AAA, I couldn't really tell the difference. Anyway.